here we are in our quarter of mutation as we move along, and we're at phase 2, and we come to Prometheus, and I think that this is one of those extraordinary figures, in a sense, in our consciousness. Not so much by how much it is remembered, though the term Promethean, which is still used to indicate great works, great creative achievements, we still carry the power of this force with us. But I think a lot of what it brought into the world, in the sense of being an imprint, is not necessarily pinpointed in the way it could be. And I think that the very power of this Godhead is veiled because it is so overwhelmingly deep in the way in which it's impacted all life. But let me do a little Promethean story for those of you who are not familiar with Prometheus. Prometheus actually comes from a very, very ancient Godhead, probably Indo-European, probably very, very early civilization. It comes to us through the Greeks, and it predates what are the familiar Greek gods. That is, Prometheus was a Titan. As a matter of fact, he wasn't even an original Titan. He was the child of a Titan, along with his brother Atlas and Amphitheus. And the Titans were an earlier Godhead. They were led by Kronos, and Kronos, who was the youngest, in fact, of the 12 Titans. And eventually there would be a great war. Interestingly enough, there is an extraordinary tradition in Godhead mythology for wars between new orders and old orders of gods. This is one of the great archetypes, that is the struggle of the gods Zeus and Hades and Poseidon, which they had to fight against Kronos, and Kronos was the god that swallowed his children, and it was his wife that tricked him and saved the life of Zeus by giving Kronos a stone wrapped up in swaddling clothes, and Kronos just scrunched it down. And Zeus was whisked away. We would eventually, in the Roman tradition, this would become Jupiter, and eventually would go to war against Kronos, and he would have the help of certain Titans. And he would release all of his siblings who were inside of Kronos, and so forth and so on. Anyway, so there was this great struggle between the old order of the gods, the Titans, and the new order of the gods. And obviously Prometheus was from the old order, but he was still one of the Titans that I guess because he was second generation, and there's many stories, so it's hard to tell why. But obviously, he was helpful to Zeus in Zeus establishing his leadership and establishing Olympus and the Godhead. As a matter of fact, there's some traditions that it was Prometheus, when Zeus had his terrible headache, it was Prometheus that whacked him on the head with a rock and split his head in order for Athena to emerge. One of those unusual, when you think about the joke about the wife telling the husband, "No, dear, I have a headache." And you get this wonderful story of Zeus with his terrible, terrible headache. And, you whack his head and out comes Athena. But anyway, and the headache went away, by the way. But Prometheus didn't really respect the new Godhead. I mean, they were sort of nouveaux to him in that sense. They were, Johnny-come-latelys, and he had a basic disrespect for them. that basic disrespect would lead to a number of things. The first thing is that according to many, many traditions, Prometheus and his brother Amphitheus, they came down onto Earth, and out of clay, they formed creatures. Humans and beasts. And they brought these clay models to Zeus, who breathed life into them, and this put life on Earth. And Zeus said that he'd breathe life into these things as long as Prometheus didn't give them any civilization. The clay model that Prometheus gave to Zeus, this became humans, became the human race. So in that sense, Prometheus is the progenitor, if you will, of humanity. His brother's clay work became the beasts of the world. And so in essence, these two titans are given mythologically an enormous importance in that sense. However, it's not really what it's all about, because those kinds of things are basically borrowed and glossed over from the yin tradition. What Prometheus did that really annoyed Zeus, and what he is famous for, and what you have statues of Prometheus all over, Radio City Music Hall in New York, and these kinds of places where there's these places that want to say that they are expressions of civilization, because this is what Prometheus is accredited with bringing civilization to humanity, is that he brought fire, and he gave fire. Supposedly in a fennel shoot, I don't know how he did that, a coal of fire, took fire from Olympus, from the gods, and gave fire to man. That really annoyed Zeus. And Zeus wanted to punish Prometheus, so he had him tied to a mountaintop in the Caucasus. And supposedly every day an eagle would come and devour Prometheus's liver, which is not a nice idea. And Prometheus, being a titan and being a god, was immortal. So the liver would grow back every day. So of course the punishment was this eternal pain. By the way, one of the themes that was later borrowed in Christian mythology for some of the pain of hell. That is this concept of the endless pain in which you do not in fact perish from it, in the sense that it just, you just keep on surviving it. Eventually, and there's many different stories, supposedly the one that's given the most credit is the fact that Hercules, not intentionally, but in one of his, he had these quests that he had to do, he came upon Prometheus and freed him. And Zeus could hardly get mad at him, because Hercules was Zeus's son, and he wasn't about to do anything to that. However, Zeus, being Zeus, was never really satisfied unless he could exact his revenge. And so he had, I don't remember the name of the god who did it. He had some god create some kind of incredible concoction. It may have been Chiron. Some kind of incredible concoction of the this and that of everything. The good, the bad, the this and that, blah blah blah, all kinds of stuff. And molded it into the shape of a female form. And Zeus breathed life into it. And this female was given the name Pandora. And Pandora was given to the brother of Prometheus, Amphitheus, the one who created the animals, was given to him as a bride. Despite the fact that his brother Prometheus had warned him, do not accept gifts from the Olympians. Again, there was this old animosity between Olympians and Titans, even for the Titans that helped them gain power. Amphitheus was overwhelmed by the beauty and mystery of Pandora. And so he accepted her as a bride. And at the wedding ceremony, Zeus bless his heart, gave Pandora a very special gift. He gave her a beautiful box. Now, I guess most of you know that story. Pandora opened the box, and the horrors of the world were released. War and famine, disease, and Pandora's box. So we have a very complex story here. And all of it is rooted in this Promethean Godhead. So let us take a look. I don't know if any of you ever looked at the what is this actress? Jolie, the one who did the Tomb Raiders. One of the Tomb Raiders is about looking for Pandora's box, and they actually find it. And special effects in movies today can really be brilliant. It was a lovely moment. But anyway, one of those great myths. I mean, one of those, Anyway, okay. So let's get to what this is all about. Remember where we left off, in a sense. Where we left off was the sudden sort of point that you get to, that when you have this driving force of the growth principle, this driving force of genetic imperative, hormones, all of these things. When you go through this process of bonding, of reproducing, in essence, the life force, in a sense, lets go of you. There is then simply this horizon that you seem to move towards faster and faster and faster as you close out your cycle of utility, without being too mean. So we get here. And when we get to this place, we get not to the glory of Prometheus. The glory of Prometheus is the fire. But what is this fire? Threonine, interesting codon. Very red, hot, in a sense, codon. And the key to understanding the nature of this face and this codon is the 26th gate. You have two gates in here that have a profound impact on life, the 5 and the 26. The 26 is something that you begin to understand its enormous impact by seeing the first 10 stages of development in the first 88 degrees of life in the womb, where you see that, everything about the 26th gate is that it is the initiator of the immune system. I mean, it literally creates the immune system. It makes it possible for the biological form to develop both defense and offense in order to maintain its survival. One of the more fascinating things about the 4426 as a channel is understanding it in terms of temperature. That is, that the 44 is cool and that the 26 is hot. And it is this 26 heat, this fire. This is the fire that burns in humanity. I mean, this is the glow, if you will, of, the Promethean power, because this is where it is. It is a gate of extraordinary willpower. I mean, extraordinary. It is the preponderance of the great. It is a power that is really amazing in the sense that, this is the force that not only creates the immune system, but it provides all its warriors. All its warriors. If the body graph had this kind of, mechanical interpretive capacity during Babylonian times, the 26th gate without question would have been called the gate of the warrior. I mean, the gait of the warrior in the sense of the gait of the soldier, the gait of the fighter in the cause of the tribe. You know, this is not an individual fighter. This is a tribal fighter. This is... Have you ever thought about the history of war? I was having... my eldest son is having his year-end exams, and he's having a history exam today. As a matter of fact, as I teach you. And yesterday we were just all talking history, and we were talking about a certain war. And my young son, who's 8, he started to ask me if certain countries had ever been to war. You know, things like, you know, France, Britain, whatever. And it was hard not to chuckle at, you know, the realization of the whole history of humanity is warfare. I mean, the whole history of it. And when you think about it, at least, you know, it's probably the only revenge that womankind ever had, were that men were stupid enough to go to war and kill each other. Because that's what they did. And you know, they would get married at or however they bonded at 16, 17, 18, go off to war, and in many cases never come back. This was the way to fill the time towards the horizon with intensity. It is really something to understand. There's this old joke, you know, again a pejorative on women, about the nature of prostitution, that it was, you know, that it was the first, you know, thing that was marketed in that sense. It is really something to understand that the greatest marketing focus in humanity has been the jingoism that points human beings, males particularly, towards warfare once they have been productive. That is, genetically. It's just one of the things you see. The other thing is that it is the only cure that you can have for male overpopulation. You know, you have traditions in certain societies that have been going on for thousands of years, in which females are aborted in favor of having males. They have an enormous problem today, for example, in China, where you know, for every 100 girls, there's 112 or 114 boys. At some point, that is going to be an enormous problem, and those males, you know, unless they are given an exit, are going to find a way to even out the score. It's just one of those things about nature, is that when we get to this particular place in the wheel, one of the things that we get to is an aggressiveness in terms of, trying to expand one's power. You know, everything about, you know, what we saw in Hades is we saw that, you know, what is left is the accumulation of power, the accumulation of wealth, you know, the establishment of artistic greatness, to be able to leave monuments behind, all of those kinds of things. And yet that is not something that is necessarily possible for everyone. And one of the things about the 26, it is its darkest nature, is that, you know, the 26 is this, carries with it a deep warrior cult. And by the way, to go back to my marketing comment, today it's all been turned into marketing. It's all been turned into salesmanship. You know, when you look at the modern interpretation of the 26th gate, and at least the way in which I interpret the 26th gate, is that now it is the gate of salesmanship. It is this ego gate of marketing for the benefit of the tribe. But at the same time, if the marketing doesn't work, the club might. You see this in negotiations. After all, we have a channel of transmission and tribal communication. In this tribal communication, there's attempts to negotiate with the other. Sometimes, very false negotiations when in fact you already know. Saddam and Bush in their dance before the war, you already know that the negotiation itself isn't getting anywhere, will not get anywhere for whatever reasons. And underneath that, that attaché case that carries all the documents is a weapon, because it's in the same place. This fire that burns. And it is a fire, truly. It is a deep, deep, deep fire that burns. Remember Pandora's box, because it's all part of the same thing. You see, if you give the light, civilization, if you give this to humankind, in other words, if you give them godlike qualities, it is clear in the mythology, Prometheus shaped those clay figures on the image of the gods, in the same way that we have borrowed that tradition. After all, the New Testament and the Old Testament, particularly the Old Testament, deeply impacted by Greek thought at the time in which the Old Testament was being coalesced and the New Testament was about to come into, these themes are deep, deep, deep within them. And at the moment that you create man in the image of God, then man is going to have the same qualities, in a sense, in microcosm of the Godhead. And you see, the Godhead showed no shame in showing that they were good, bad, evil, wicked, sweet, kind. They were everything. They were everything. You look at the Godhead and you see, all of the variations, the cunning and the evil ones, the sweet ones. You see everything. And of course, this is what humankind is. This is this everything. This is what this energy is all about. And with this, civilization comes what Pandora's box opens up. The anger, the jealousy, the violence, the deep depressions, the pain, the fury. Nothing like a revolution to show the fury of the new order getting rid of the old. Oh boy, is that fun. Look at every revolution. And you can go right back to the Titans and the Olympians. It's amazing when you think about it. They're all the same archetype. It's all the same thing. It's what Prometheus gave us. You see, the spin on Prometheus is, he gave us, civilization. Yes. How nice. How nice. But it isn't. He gave us warfare and pain and all the woes that come with being in the image of the Godhead. In a way, it's a black joke. It's a kind of joke that I like. It's the Promethean Titan who had no respect for the Olympians, creating these microcosmic models of the Olympians to show them what they look like. What a laugh, despite his liver ordeal that went on for a while. But what a laugh. There's a Titan's revenge for you. You see, we do not need to worship that old Olympian Godhead anymore. Because we are it. We live out all of its madness, its passions, its jealousies, its curses. We do. We have become perfect mirrors for the chaos. Have you ever read the way in which these gods dealt with each other? My goodness. They had nothing but problems with each other. They were always politicking. They were always scheming, always. Thank you, Prometheus. You got us down just pat. Created us in the image of those gods. 26th gate. You know, the T cell. This is the place of the T cell. Oh, you don't want to meet one of those. I mean, if you could see it in one of these Japanese science fiction movies, you know, and the T cell eating everything it sees alive, woo, spooky. That's what the 26th gate is. So one of the things that we get to see is the influence of Prometheus on the passions of the male psyche. And it has its greatest impact in that zone between, you know, the first and the second nodal cycle. You know, the cycles are about 18 and a half years. So between 18 and a half and 36 and a half, you know, 36 years old, 37 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood, you know, this is the zone where the Promethean influence on the personality has its strongest impact. This aggressiveness in dealing with the world. You know, this, this readiness to do just about anything, in a sense. To find some kind of way to occupy oneself so that one doesn't have to watch the horizon. So many human beings have died because of the influence of this face. I mean, so many human beings have been put in open graves, have been butchered, have been cannibalized, have been, well, disappeared. I mean, as much as I enjoy the Promethean myth, because it is one of the most complex, I see what that has brought to us. And in a way, it's the program's cleansing program, you know? I mean, what else to do? I mean, you could see that in the gods. You know, the gods, they didn't have anything to do. They were immortal, after all. They had nothing to do, you know, so they just schemed away. You know, in humanity, you know, in this dread of the end, enjoys its scheming away. Yeah, I'm a 26, and I have Jupiter in the 26. You know, when I hear thunder, I say, "Oh, hail Zeus," and I understand its power so deeply. I mean, okay, so let's see where it goes. The next step you have to take, because wherever you see either the 5 or the 15, you're looking at something that has an extraordinary depth of impact. The 515 as a channel, as a life force, is really the central life force for life itself. Right? It is the channel of, the full channel of a cell. It is something that is a part of every form, the exception being plants, by the way, so that their pattern can constantly be changed. Of course, they have the 15. So it is a key in understanding the nature of life. It is, after all, this channel of being in the flow. And it is something to grasp about this 5, is that 5 is about ritual and habits. Ritual and habits. And one of the things about the way in which we deal with this movement towards death is that we lock ourselves into specific rituals and habits, and these rituals and habits help turn the wheel. They do. And it is the establishment of these rituals and habits that give the 26 a reason to burn. I mean, to burn. This is all very, very mutative in that sense. but to give it a reason, So, for example, the establishment of a ritual. In order to maintain the establishment of a ritual, one has to get everyone to participate. The 26 is the salesman. And if you don't participate, it will become the recruiter. And if you really don't participate, it'll dragoon you. One way or another, you're going to participate in the ritual. And you're going to defend the ritual against others. You're going to defend your habits against others. You're going to try to impose your habits on others. Perhaps the most powerful of all proselytizing gates, and you only see that word in the 43:23, is in the 26, in this 26, in its relationship to, its connection to the 5 here. I mean, this is something that, it's like looking at the United States, because one of the things you notice about all this is that it's deeply tribal collective. The United States has a tendency to proselytize its idea of democracy, as an example. So this proselytization has generally been the sales part of the 26. And they could sell their democracy by selling the flashy images of the success of their society. The moment that the 26 stops being a salesman marketing a philosophy, it becomes a soldier imposing a dictatorship of one kind or another, even if it's imposing a so-called democratic one. And it's something to understand about this relationship between the 26 and the 5, is that there is this endless competition as to which ritual and which habits are going to be established as the pattern for humanity. It gives the males something to do so that, they're out of the house. And maybe they'll die and solve a lot of problems. But this is basically what it's about. They have something to jump on. You can see that in the sense of, the modern world is fun to deconstruct. I mean, think about athletic teams. The teams in various sports that represent your city or represent your country. Here you see this classic example of, the hot support for a specific pattern or ritual, I mean, here is your team, and you're going to support your team. And you'll notice with these teams that there are specific rituals, the game itself. There are specific habits, the way in which the supporters of the team act. And as we well know, for example, in world football, that there is vast levels of violence and hooliganism that exist that come to the surface in these matches. Again, these are just basic patterns. And they're basic patterns to, absorb basically the male psyche, because that's what it's designed for. Basically absorb the male psyche, get it involved in these things, and ultimately, in a sense, kill it off. And if you don't kill it off directly, at least it's absorbed and occupied, and it's not a problem. We don't want problems, do we? Now, the program, it doesn't want any problems. It doesn't. It's got it all very, very carefully laid out. And think about the impact of this. And when I say that it's designed for the male psyche, the impact on the female psyche is that they tend to support the male in this approach. In other words, they become, supporters of that, in order for, in order to get rid of them. I mean, the revenge of the matriarchy. I mean, in the old days in the matriarchy, they used to send all the men off to war. That was fine. I mean, they would keep the ones they needed for reproduction, and then they would just send them off. And they're replaceable after all. They are kind of cute, no? Well, I guess you gotta have my sense of humor to appreciate that. What a great name. The taming power of the small. I love that. We have two small gates, the 62 and the 9. And it's always about the little things. In the 62, it's about the facts, the details. Here it's about the energy for that. It's the energy for detail work. It's the energy that is described as, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step in this context of the movement towards death. It's a rather interesting one. And of course, this is the step-by-step focus on the patterns and rituals. I mean, when we are dealing with this relationship between the 9 and the 5, this is the format energy of the logic process feeding, the key ingredient to the whole logic theme in life. And so here, when we see these two in this relationship together, to recognize that there is a deep focus placed on these themes of habit and ritual. I mean, deep focus. And of course, the thing about it is that given the nature of duality, that these themes work best in a world in which they are confronted with a polarity. I mean, think about the habits of the 5 and translate that as you do naturally, because of course the 5 leads to the 15, which is the love of humanity, that leads to the 7, which is the role of the leader, to the 31, to the expression of leadership of the collective. I mean, it is a whole collective stream. And when you look at this relationship together, and the 5 is creating the pattern becomes, as an example, let's say the political or the religious following of your people. So we get a focus on this particular pattern. And the focus on that particular pattern is supported by the constant heat of the 26. That constant heat that is constantly transmitting, this is our power. It is heating up the connection to it, the loyalty to it, the respect for it. It is ready to defend it at all costs, and it's ready to promote it to others as the pattern. And what it loves more than anything else is that there's a pattern on the other side that is different. It's like looking at the nature of warfare today. I think the nature of warfare today is one of the most fascinating things to grasp. That is, we have once again, the Titans and the Olympians. We have this old order, and the old order is made up of atomic bombs and missiles and, huge machines and vast numbers of soldiers. That's Titanic. And that's where it's going. It's sinking. And on the other side, we have the new order. One person. One person. With a bomb strapped around their body. Walking into a supermarket. That is a very different kind of war. As a matter of fact, it is a war that can never be stopped. It is a war in which each single human being can create its own enemies list. And of course you can see that whatever side you're on, or whether you're somewhere in between, that you've got the 9-5 driving and riding that 26 power. It is going to be your pattern. It is going to be your ritual. It is going to be your habit. You're going to be focused on it. You're not going to overlook anything, one detail at a time. And God forbid that there's that straw that comes that breaks the camel's back, the 9-3, and all hell breaks loose. The last version was shock and awe, you know. Now, I've been really, really mean to old Prometheus. And I don't particularly like to make enemies of Titans, so we'll say something nice, I guess. I don't know. The 11th gate, the gate of ideas, gate of peace. Funny name, no? You cannot enjoy the wonder and the success of war without getting peace, at least temporarily, as a reward. All soldiers say they want peace. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, you know, when you see any soldier publicly, you know, on the box, on TV, these kinds of things, you know. And they all claim that they would love peace. They would like to have peace. Yeah. But of course, you know, they are going to fight for it. And that's what they do. And the 11th gate is, yeah, I said I was going to be nice. I can't be too nice. You know, there are all kinds of ideas that get attached to, you know, this drive to establish a pattern and to establish that pattern over everyone else. You know, again, you have to see that everything about living in a duality is that everything is always trying to find a balance, which means there is always this struggle going on, one side and the other. And of course we have the competing ideas that are out there. The competing ideas about what is right and what isn't right. Now, of course, in Prometheus's name, it says that despite the fact that we are going to have a whole slice of, you know, males being driven by this kind of programming to be ready to fight for their cause, we're also going to have those males that seek through ideas a way to stop it. But of course, amongst those who have ideas to stop it are others who have ideas about how to make it keep on going. And, you know, it's not a total victory for the nice side for Prometheus. This is not what all of this is about. It isn't. See, I think anybody with any intelligence who looks at the world wonders about its madness. You don't have to go very far in history to see madness. You can see it today. You can see it all around us. This Pandora's box, because this is really the result. See, it's not directly attributed to Prometheus. It was his brother. It was his brother's bride. It was her gift. You know, blah, blah, blah. But it is the byproduct of Prometheus establishing this mockery of the gods in us, and to set us on the road to the struggles of the madness of the gods. And this opening up of Pandora's box, you know, all of this feeds on the vanity of the not-self. It really does. I mean, yes, it's a control mechanism. Everything in the program is control. Everything. The program is controlling everything. You know, it's not like the program's personal in that sense. I don't mean to say that. It's simply that the mechanism is a control mechanism. This is what has evolved. And we are locked in this control mechanism. And in this control mechanism, that the viability of humanity in terms of the demands of the program and the evolutionary direction we're going in is simply that we be viable enough to reproduce and demonstrate self-reflected consciousness. That is achieved relatively early in the life. I mean, it just is. And you see, the program did not devise anything else in that sense. There is no other purpose for us in terms of the program. I mean, this is one of the things to really understand about why there is suffering on this plane, is that, the program didn't design us for the complete process, because we're not needed for a complete process. We're not. We are a reproductive evolutionary engine. And that we in ourselves, in the illusion of what we experience, is a byproduct of this evolution. Yeah, there are those of us that get a chance to be able to see, after all, it is the tradition of the gods to reveal the truth to man. Prometheus is a part of that. I'm a part of that. And you get to see what it is. And you get to see that for most, there is nothing one can do. That the control mechanism has succeeded. That the fact that they have been given no program for their life, means that time after their basic productivity, that time is controlled by this. By this. I mean, in one of her radio programs, Deborah Bergman, who's been doing a wonderful series on the stars, did a whole length of things on Sagittarius. This is this zone where we have these particular gates in this phase. And this is also where the galactic center is. I mean, this is a very, very powerful place in that sense in the wheel, and a deep and profound influence on the psyche of humanity. It has formed the way in which we live our lives. And that you can see that our lives are based on an endless competition between us and them. And that there is no escaping that, in the sense that that is what the not-self is locked into. This course is about seeing that not only are we deeply controlled by the program, that our psyche, the collective mind, is profoundly manipulated by this input. And that only in breaking a covenant with these gods can you free yourself from being in their image. I am not made in the image of anything other than me. I am here for my own authority. I am here to be my own Godhead. I am here to stand alone. I am here to know precisely what is correct for me, based on my truth, and based on a truth that resides within me, that was there within me from the moment I emerged on this plane, my inner authority. And you can only break that covenant when you move away from the mind making decisions, because you can see. Any newspaper front page you read, you see Thrianin. You see this second face. Oh boy, is it there. Every day, day after day, day after day, day after day, same thing. See these gods? It is sad that they are not remembered and that they are not understood. To see the force of Prometheus in our lives, this face, the force it has on the male psyche on this planet, how it has held the male psyche in its thrall, for the entire time of our modern civilization, going back to the height of Greek civilization. Yeah. All you can do is break the covenant. All you can do is honor your strategy and authority. This is the remarkable thing. It's, we're getting close to the end of our journey. And it's just astonishing when you begin to add up the impact of each of these faces on the psyche of humanity, when you begin to see how deeply, deeply, deeply manipulated it is. And of course, worse than all of that, it doesn't just simply take in the the imprinting of the bundle field. But the way it interprets all of that is rooted in its own openness, in its own relative not self, in its own dysfunction and improper frequency. And the results are incredibly distorted. What people will die for, kill for, believe in. Unbelievable. We talk about somebody who's burning with an idea. Well, you can see that relationship right here, 2611. Just burning with it. The madness that will drive somebody to destroy themselves, to kill innocent people. And no, it's not their fault. This is not about blame or fault. It is about the dismay that comes with seeing the blindness and the ignorance and the vanity in human beings. And that, where to look. Because you cannot blame them. You can't. We didn't start this. I didn't start this. The forces started this. They kicked me into gear. Otherwise, blindly to the end. With blood on our hands all the way. All the way. See, I used to get really annoyed, these year-end Christmas cards that people would send out in which they would say, peace on earth. And I think, this is part of the duality. It's part of the duality. Here you see the gate of peace and the gate of going to war. And they're the same chemistry. It's the same thing. You have to be outside of that duality. You can neither be peace nor war. You have to operate simply out of your own authority. Because these things are illusions. War has always brought, enormous pain and suffering. No matter what the claims are, no matter what the reasons supposedly to justify them. And it's all because the program didn't build in anything of value as a construct for humans beyond being reproductive and self-aware. After all, the program in and of itself is not intelligent. I think that's hard for just about anybody to grasp. It's a mechanism. It's a mechanism. And so there are, the more civilized we become, the more aware we become. When we have, this kind of mystical breakthrough where we get to cut through the veil and we get to look at it, it's astonishing to see it. It's this same old primitive program. And it doesn't matter whether I gloss it up in modern terms and say the 26 is, your salesperson. The fact is it's still there. It still carries the same old stuff. It still carries the theme of blood and destruction. The heat. Hotting things up. Heating up the people. Cranking up the crowds. It's all out there. I watch every day on the news, groups of people who are enraged at one thing or another. Men in black masks, running around with rifles. Wow. Prometheus. It's so deep in the male psyche. They don't know what else to do but die. Within this context, when you see the The suicide bomber, the modern version of the ultimate Promethean warrior. I mean, nothing to do. There is nothing ahead. There is nothing worthwhile. There is in essence no purpose. There is simply the horizon. Why not get to the horizon earlier? And you get to the horizon earlier and you're rewarded. Be this kind of warrior, and the idea that shrouds you is the idea that says that you're going to be rewarded, that you're immediately going to go to heaven. And boof, you get them out of the food chain. Not only them, they take their victims with them. So interesting to see the cold thresher of the program, and to see why we need to break the covenant with the gods. Because in fact, they're not any good for us. Not anymore. They do not serve us. They do not serve humankind. They do not. They serve the not-self. They serve the program. They are embodiments and imprints of the program. But they do not serve you and me, and cannot. This is also, I guess, the best thing that I can say about Prometheus, is that despite the fact that he was imprisoned by the greatest of imprisoners, he did get free. No matter how deeply chained humanity is to the not-self, there are still those of us who can be free, who can break those chains. And break those chains and step away. And get to live our authority. I guess the first suicide bomber, by the way, I just thought of that, funny enough. Samson. In the Bible, the Samson Delilah, where he brings down the temple on everybody, including himself. With an idea, a warrior will easily sacrifice himself to the ritual of death. I mean, the kamikaze pilots in the Second World War, wrapped in the ritual of all that. No thanks. I'd rather be my own God, I rather trust my own authority. I have no respect for, the not-self.